Hello there, welcome to another episode of our podcast, The Dialogue. The Dialogue Podcast is live on Anchor, on SoundCloud, YouTube, and many other platforms. I'm glad to welcome you to another episode. Today we are talking to a lecturer who doesn't like to be addressed as a lecturer, essentially. I think he prefers to be called an educator. He is on a course to educate many people about patterns of governance in Africa and what he has called the ideas of liberty, African ideas of liberty. We will delve very much into that and many ways he views the patterns of governance in ancient Africa and what we have today, particularly in Nigeria. I'm glad to welcome Charles Feyisade Adeyemi, who is also known as Chale. He is the founder and the leader at Chale Institute. I'm glad to welcome you to this podcast.
Thank you very much.
How are you doing, sir?
Very good. I'm fine.
So I took your course. The course is live on Udemy, by the way. There will be more about that. You'll find the link in this podcast to get to know more about the course. But the course is 10 African ideas of liberty. By the way, African ideas of liberty. First of all, before we get into the details of what you do, I like to get a background and I like to get people's stories about Nigeria. What is your Nigerian story? How did you grow up?
Oh, wow. My Nigerian story started, of course, at birth in an hospital as a premature baby, and there is no incubator that works. And in the nearest cities where the incubators worked, there was no electricity.
That's it. That sounds like a popular, not very popular story, but yours is peculiar.
This premature baby ended up being, incubated in a kind of makeshift incubator.
You did not
domestically by my parents.
There had to be something had to be done for you to survive.
Yeah, of course, obviously. That's why I can be here now.
which is an incredible story.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead. You were born in which of our cities?
Oh, in Ondo City.
Okay.
Ondo State,
and
Nigeria.
Grew up
there. Yeah, that's right.
School
I had my primary school, St. Raphael's Kiddie School, Omach Secondary School, Adeyemi College of Education. I had my first degree there as an OAU degree, biology education.
Can you speak closer to the mic?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So you did biology education first.
Yes, my first degree.
That struck me the first time I saw you speak. You were speaking about socialism, advancement, capitalism, how things can work better. It struck me that you did biology at first, but then you had to switch. At what point did you move? I mean, education is open. You could do anything in today's world. But at what point did you switch from the sciences to what we now call the
social sciences?
At
my master's degree level, I went to study tourism development because I was interested in natural ecosystems. I was interested in theme parks, ecological parks, national parks, and so on. That was the most exciting part of biology for me, traveling to look at nature. So that led me to want to study ecological tourism, and the closest I could find was tourism development at the Center for Sustainable Development, University of Ibadan. So yes, I studied tourism development for my master's, and my specialization is ecological tourism anyway. So that was how I found myself in social sciences.
Incredible. So you have moved from the sciences, biology, education into tourism, social sciences, and now you are from the way my interaction with your course and with the way you speak, you are essentially what I would call I don't know now,
an economist or something,
a revolutionary somehow who is on the course to educate people. Let's talk about founding Chale Institute, which location, which tag is called "Learn to be Free." That's the byline. The byline. I like how that sounds, and I'd like you to take me into what led you to creating Chale Institute, and what's the essence? What do you want to achieve with that?
Okay, so I will link back to the previous question to say that my interest and passion for development did not actually start with the master's degree. I've always had a lot of, leaning towards what's going on around the community development, news, and all of that. My father was an economist, and he was also a politician.
My father was an economist too.
He was
also a politician.
He was, and he's late.
Mine is late
since 1998. So,
1999.
But well, we have very similar stories. That's very interesting. So I learned so much from him. Even when I was like 7-8 years old, I remember that I was using newspapers to learn how to read and write.
As young as you were?
Yes. Like when people were using Ali and Simbi, of course I used it too, but I also used newspapers. Like we were reading newspapers together. He made me to read newspapers to him. And he made me to listen to FRUCN when I was 7 and 8.
As early as possible.
7 a.m. every day.
Socially aware.
And 9 p.m. I listened to NTA News.
I had that story too.
And things like that. So I had so much from him. I got so much from him, and when he left, I continued listening to the news and stuff like that. So I got very conscious very early.
Yeah.
And even though I studied biology, and I studied biology because I wanted to study medicine in the first place, and those kind of track.
Leave that.
Yes. So now coming back to this other question,
Chale Institute.
About Chale Institute. In 2017, I had this beautiful experience where I went to Obafemi Awolowo University to watch D.K. Chukwumerije's Made in Nigeria concert.
Okay.
And there was a poetry workshop in the morning on Saturday before the evening concert. So I got to OAU late, such that the poetry workshop had ended, and then I was like 3-4 hours early, or 5 hours, I can't remember.
So
early.
You needed something to play with.
Yeah, so I was and then I heard this saxophone sound somewhere around the SUB building, and I said, wow, that's so lovely. And then I followed that sound, and it led me to this hall. And inside that hall, I saw a gathering of students, and I saw a banner that says African Students for Liberty. And so I sat down, and they were talking about economic freedom. And I said, wow, I'm in the right place. And it was that day that I discovered this
Before
group
that time,
called...
you were majorly on what course now? What area of education were you focusing on?
No, I was already a lecturer at Feyisade University.
Recently, 2017.
Yeah, I was doing my PhD.
But it wasn't into African...
No. Well, I teach culture and tourism in Africa, for example.
Something related.
Yes, I've always had this track, but what I'm trying to describe to you is how I came to now have
African
a think
ideas.
tank, the Chale Institute.
Policy research and all that.
Yes. It came to me from my interaction with African Students for Liberty group, which I volunteered with. I joined. I'm still a volunteer with them. Currently, I'm the African academic director for that group. But that group now exposed me to a global network of hundreds of organizations that are doing the same thing. Yeah, exactly. And so they, helped me to, go through this process that led to the birth of Chale Institute. So that's what I was trying to describe.
That's interesting. Chale Institute stands for, like we said, byline is learn to be free.
That's right.
That's no one has ever mentioned that to me. It sounded fresh, sounded strange, and very good too, because most of us go to school not to be free. We are not aware of any bondage. We are okay. We So what you go to school to do is to get some education. That's how we say it.
That's right.
Get a job and be okay. So it wasn't learn to be free. Learn to be free sounds deeper. What do you want to achieve with that?
Okay.
Why do people need, or are we in bondage?
Are we not free?
Do we need freedom?
I like the fact that you just played yourself into this statement. Are we not free? We've not discussed this before, but I have a book called "Are We Not Free?"
Oh, okay.
Thoughts on the evolution of the freedom struggle in Africa. That's the subtitle of the book, but the main title is "Are We Not Free?" Because one of my students asked me that exact question: Are we not free?
You say learn to be free.
So what happens is when people think about freedom, they often think the opposite, slavery and stuff, and they think, well, if we are not in slave chains, then we are free. So if you're telling them about economic freedom and all of this, they say, well, we are free. Well, so freedom it's not just when you are in slave chains. There's freedom connotes so many things, and people who are not in slave chains, who are moving around and working and doing things, they might not be free to express themselves. They might not be free to trade. There's some business ideas that come to their mind, brilliant business ideas that will bring a lot of money for themselves, create jobs for their, for the people in their environment, increase the national GDP, bring foreign exchange, legitimate businesses. But they're just not free to do the businesses because
and they're not aware.
There are some legislations that does not allow.
Is it like we're not aware that
many times people are not aware. People just know something is wrong, but they cannot place their fingers on it.
What is it?
Exactly. It's very interesting. Yeah.
There's a lot to that. Okay.
So we wanted, learn to be free is saying, look, it's not just economic freedom, but that's like the most important part of it anyway, because when you have economic freedom, so much else comes with it. So we're talking of freedom of expression, we're talking of economic freedom, we're talking of some kind of even cultural freedom, and that's, expression is in so many areas. Expression can mean speech, it could mean the way you dress, it could mean the way you express yourself through freedom of association, to even for me and you to be able to interact without anybody coming to dictate to us whether we can interact or not. It's so important. And what has happened is that studies of economies and human experiences all over the world, throughout different countries and cultures and throughout different times in history, have shown consistently that when you restrict people's freedom, then they are going to be very, very poor. It's obvious when you think of slavery. Slavery makes it obvious. You put someone in slave chains, he can't move. There's chains in his leg. You put a padlock in his mouth, and you dictate to him where to go, what to do, when to hit, and all creativity. Of that. So obviously you can see that is a very poor guy, right? So that's so obvious. But if you loosen it a little bit, it's not in direct slave chains, it's not in direct padlocked mouth and stuff. And so he doesn't even think that he's being constricted anyway, but he's actually constricted somehow.
But it's okay.
It's also going to be poor. And so if you look at all the countries in the world and you say, developing countries and developed countries, in other words, rich countries and poor countries, look at this, do a little exercise and divide countries. Forget about poor and rich countries for a minute. Forget about developing and developed for a minute. Just divide countries in the world to countries where people have freedom to trade, express themselves, do whatever, all kinds of freedom. In these countries, so much freedom. Versus countries where, in these countries, no, you're not free to do this, you're not free to do that. You're not free. Once you've divided the countries in the world into two broad groups of freedom countries versus no freedom countries, now take a second look at what you have just done. You've just divided the countries in the world into rich countries and poor countries.
Essentially. When you talk about learn to be free, I appreciate that. We have over 100 million people in Nigeria. The last time we maybe had a figure of literate people and illiterate people, I think it was maybe close to 50-50 or a little over 50 literate people in Nigeria. And even at that, the people who we call literate are not very well informed. They might be educated. Even the educated people have problems. There are examples everywhere. So how hard would it be for you and many other think tanks who want to educate people to reach them and have them understand economic freedom in your terms? It looks like a big task to me.
So this is where Bob Marley comes and sings, "Emancipate yourself from mental slavery," right? That's exactly what we're talking about. Well, I don't think that it's so
hard,
difficult or impossible. Impossible is nothing. It just requires the right strategy, the right approach, and the right communication tools, and the right people also. And that's why we're happy to have a conversation like this on this channel, and people watching and all of that, so that we begin to amplify these conversations one-on-one, word of mouth, and so on. It's not a fight, it's not a struggle, it's not a matter of these are bad guys and we have to deal with the bad guys. No, it's just a conversation. It's just us understanding how things work better than we used to do. And this is a big national conversation. There are bad leaders, of course, and that's a very big problem. But the thing is that even we, the followers, how good are we? And forget about good and bad. It's not. I don't even think of it so much as good and bad as knowledgeable versus ignorant. And I think that's the major part of it. And just like what you've said, even when people have gone to school, they sometimes get the concepts wrong. Many times, So, but when you show people examples, when you tell people that, look, even when you talk of China, which is supposed to be a very repressive country, China has over 1,000 free trade zones. Why? What are they doing with free trade zones?
Country.
Exactly. It used to be a communist country. That's what people don't know. It used to be a communist country. China, as a communist country, means that you cannot have property rights.
Cuba.
And they did not have property rights in China during communism. But 45 million people died of starvation when they were practicing that. And so, since the 70s, China has progressively, embraced pro-capitalism reforms, such that today we have people like Alibaba, Jack Ma. Everybody knows. So, there are so many Chinese capitalists. People have businesses in China. The Chinese state itself is practicing what they call state capitalism.
I heard about this.
So to say that China is a communist country is to live in the past. So these are the things we need to push out and let people understand.
On that level, hopefully, maybe through our education, we can introduce courses like this, economic freedom, and then there is the money, how money works, the course about how money works, which a lot of people are lacking, which is another talk for another day. But I'm going to pick some excerpts from the course. While I was reading through the course, I picked some excerpts. This one says, the freedom of expression, the freedom of choice, the freedom to choose and face natural consequences of our choice without harming others. If Africans seek to be free from poverty, hunger, war, and so on, then they need to pay attention to the principles of freedom, which goes back to the question of educating ourselves and breaking out of this seeming bondage. I'd like you to expatiate on that.
Okay, so that's like a summary of what I've been saying all along. The importance of freedom, which I used slavery to demonstrate, because what you basically do to a slave is to take away his freedoms. And when you take away the slave's freedoms, you basically create a poor man out of that slave. So, but if you are living in a situation where they have not totally made you an obvious slave that is in chains, but somehow they have restricted your movement, they have restricted your ability to associate with other people, they have restricted your ability to trade, they have restricted your ability to express yourself, and so on and so forth, then they have also increased your chances of being very poor. So that's the same thing I've been saying all along, and summarized in there.
I get that. Nigerians, everybody's anxious. Everybody right now, the way it is, it's been like that for a while. But I think for a long time. But I think right now there is more consciousness. Maybe in a wrong way. Maybe we are not fully informed. But many people know that I don't like the life I'm living right now. I cannot afford this. I don't have this. How do Nigerians begin to take baby steps? Okay, I want to do something that, you have a think tank. There are many other think tanks, civil society groups working to, make things better. And when we talk about think tanks, there are professors, there are many people. How come we have been lacking in leadership if we have this many people? Is it the question of political participation? Is it the fact that goes back to education? Many of us are not really informed, but those who are informed, the few who are informed, how has it been so hard over the past 10, 20 plus years to make progress as a country?
So when people are informed, it's important to also ask, what is that information? What are they informed about? And how correct is this information that they are supposedly informed about? There's a concept called intellectual humility. It's very, very important. We intellectuals make mistakes. It's obvious, it's well known, the data is out there. Economists have been wrong so many times, and there's a whole lot of essays and articles about why have economics been wrong over and over again. So what I'm trying to show here is that the fact that some people are supposedly informed, does not mean that whatever information they have cannot be questionable.
Okay.
Time and events might prove them wrong. And if that happens, we should learn. We should take the lessons from there. So one thing that has happened that may not be obvious to so many observers right now who don't take cognizance of history and the kinds of ideas that guided decisions in the past is the fact that many of the so-called informed decisions of the past were wrong.
Okay.
Unfortunately, and unfortunately, because people haven't learned the mistakes of the past, they want to repeat them. So I give an example. Currently, there's talk about nationalizing companies that belong to South Africa.
Yeah, that was a suggestion, which I think is a bad suggestion.
Well, some people think it's a good suggestion because they want to retaliate, because there is xenophobic attacks in South Africa, which is bad, and therefore they want to pay bad with bad. And that's how some people think. So, but there are intellectuals supporting it. Nationalization, the word nationalization itself, when some people hear it, maybe it's big grammar or something, and inside that word there is nation inside. So that means if I'm patriotic, I should support it. That is how I suppose some people think. So when they hear nationalization, they say, this is good. So South Africa owns these businesses and they are doing bad things to our people. So let us retaliate.
Not the South African government.
Exactly. Now that's when you start interrogating the details. You now discover that it is not just individuals, but many cases Nigerians. It's just like people that attack ShopRite. When you attack ShopRite, who do you think is the owner of the shop you are attacking there? It is a franchise. You are attacking Nigerians. So, but that's when you have interrogated issues. Some people have not interrogated issues, so they just say,
react.
So, but when the nationalization conversation is even beyond, attacking ShopRite and things like that, it's bigger. I mean, somebody wrote on the internet about that. There's about 170 something. I saw an article on social media. I don't know. Yes, that are South African owned in Nigeria, and that's
the French have over 100.
Now is the time for Nigeria to take them over because of what is happening in South Africa. So now this is something that people are talking about right now, and I think even Nigeria's ruling party, has said something in that direction. It was a
suggestion, like I said, and I hope you ended that way.
I hope so too. But I'm trying to make a point about this issue of informed decisions. That suggestion is an informed decision
of someone.
For some people. They are celebrating it and they are hoping that it will be implemented. Now, what I'm saying is, I'm not even quarreling with whoever said that and who thinks it's an informed decision. I just want us to check history. We can check different countries, but let's stay in Nigeria. Haven't we done nationalization before? So let's go and look at the 70s and the 80s. We were nationalizing companies. We nationalized missionary schools. I mean, that would be the best example. What has been the outcome of nationalization in this country? You nationalize the schools. I mean, look at the schools. There were British teachers in the schools. There were Indian teachers. There were Ghanaian teachers. The best teachers were gotten from all over the world to teach the subjects where they are needed. You nationalize these schools, and then these people leave the schools. Everything goes down. I mean, we killed education. As far as I'm concerned, this country's education system was murdered when we decided to nationalize schools.
And that's just one example of many.
So today, I say, if you nationalize South African firms in Nigeria
give them
today,
10 years. Give them 5 years.
Tomorrow morning, they are dead.
Meanwhile,
and then Nigerians are out of jobs.
Yes.
And then they run away to South Africa, where they will be attacked again.
In your submissions, in the course and in many other ways, like we have just said, capitalism is the way forward for most countries. Most countries that we have seen, they have free markets. They allow people to trade. There is freedom, economic freedom, and many ways people can, do things. Is socialism entirely bad? Like, let me go to one of the professors that you made reference to in your course. He wrote an article. He made a presentation about how socialism destroyed Africa. And he mentioned examples that I agree with in Tanzania, in Zimbabwe, in Nigeria, for instance. He talked about the Ajaokuta steel rolling company.
That's a big example.
For years and years, we have pumped in money and monies into that company.
We have thousands of pensioners, and we have not produced any steel from that place.
So, how bad is socialism? Because there's actually many people in this country who have a social democratic party whose basic platform is to
promote socialism.
Right now, the federal government spends millions of naira on the social investment program as a way to alleviate people from poverty and all that. How bad is socialism? Are there any good examples?
So socialism is a very popular idea in Nigeria. It's been the dominant ideology of Nigerian politicians, leaders, academia, and the masses since.
Just give us money. let's enjoy the
I
money.
should give you what?
I mean, that's
exactly.
that's the tag.
Share, redistribute wealth.
Give us money.
Of course, that's the point. So everybody likes socialism. Just share. So, well, I would say that the intention is good. So because you're asking me, is it
How bad is
how
it?
bad is it? Is it like there's nothing good about it? So the good thing about socialism is the intention, right? Like you want to fight poverty by redistributing wealth to everybody. So that's a good intention, because what you want is, you don't want anybody to be poor. So nobody can fault your intention. That was like, I mean, this is a very good intention. And many people have that intention sincerely to make sure that wealth goes round, which is important. Now, the issue is that, it's a very technical issue. The issue is that intentions have, they don't determine consequences. So any action that you take has its consequence regardless of your intention. So if a mosquito lands on your testicle and your brother brings a hammer because he wants to kill
He has a
mosquito,
good intention. He wants to help
brilliant
you.
intention, but the consequence will not listen to the intention. So that's what we're saying. So cases and cases and cases of socialist rhetoric, of redistribution of wealth and so on all over the world have piled up evidence that the action of socialist policies has very terrible consequences. And the reason is very simple. In our African, which is what that course is trying to point out. In our native African systems, we don't wake up and go to the king's house, our ancestors, before colonization. We don't go and say, KBSC, we don't tell government. I mean, our government was our monarchs, and we didn't say, the monarchs should please give us food and all of that. No, people worked. And throughout Africa, you hear there's no food for lazy man. And you hear that if your pocket is empty, ask your hand why. We promoted
Hard work.
Productivity and hard work. And that is how you bake the national cake. It is true that Nigeria has crude oil in the ground, and we have fertile soil. We have natural resources. But natural resources does not produce wealth unless there is the human element that goes in there to,
do the work and
exactly turn this to wealth. The problem of socialism is socialism de-emphasizes productivity, and it gives you an entitlement mentality that you sit there and we're going to redistribute wealth to you. But who is producing the wealth? Where is the wealth coming from? So it comes from a place of assumption that there is unlimited national wealth.
Nigeria is rich.
There's just unlimited national wealth, and so we just need a good leader who will redistribute it. And that is the socialist rhetoric.
And I quite agree.
The fault in there is, look, there is no national wealth anywhere unless people are producing it.
Who think like this?
Yeah.
When people call on radio shows, when people talk in the streets,
give us this,
you
give
hear
us
them
that,
say,
give us that.
this country is rich. It is yes, indeed, there is corruption, like you pointed out,
terrible
cronyism
cases of corruption
in
yes.
Capitalism, which we will get to. But people need to understand that if you don't work, most of the people who are the wealthiest people had to produce and they increase their productivity
that's how it works.
to be able to create wealth. So if we can do that on the large scale, on as a country,
yes.
everyone is conscious that this is our goal. I mean, we see what China is doing, like you mentioned. The United States, people have businesses, small businesses running everywhere. And let's talk about our own national life in terms of how we have been how we have been able to imbibe capitalism in some ways that has helped us. I think the GSM is a good example.
Yeah, sure.
And early before while I was learning about government, what we used to hear is that Nigeria runs a mixed system of government, socialist and capitalist.
Okay.
But I think so far we have seen successes in capitalism. At what point would you say Nigeria switched from being this socialist country to let's do more capitalism? I think, like I said, the example of the GSM, there are many more examples that allowed companies to come in and make money and then multiply productivity.
Well, I think that Babangida's regime might have started a few, reforms in the direction of capitalism, but majorly, I will give it to Obasanjo's 1999, his second coming of Obasanjo. I think that's when we really had what I can regard as substantial movement towards capitalism in Nigeria. But in any case, I still think that Nigeria is mostly socialist, even now. Mostly socialist. Yeah.
So, when we say capitalism, in the course you talked about cronyism, which is the problem I have with capitalism too. Before now, I agree with socialists that
capitalism is bad.
Let more people have. I mean, it looks like some people have. Looks like
too
some
much,
people
too much,
have too much,
and some people have nothing.
Only a few people have little. I mean, so it becomes blurry. Let's. I agree with socialists when they say, how can one person have
so much when so many people are so poor?
Yes, that's the idea. But again, this person worked this way, which is where I want you to expatiate on cronyism. Why have we designed a government where this person has to collect the contract because he knows this person, and then it continues to make money, and then there are other people who can do the job, or maybe they can't do the job, or for some reason only one person and their caucus and their friends get to enjoy this capitalist venture where contracts, you have to supply this, then you give it to one person, which is where a lot of people have a problem with capitalism. How can we address that cronyism, which is like a fault to that system of government?
Okay, so first of all, you talked about economic inequality, the idea that some people have so much. A few people have so much, like a few people have maybe 70% of the wealth.
Yeah.
And then the entire big majority is just struggling with the remaining 30%, which is the pattern, almost all over the world, basically. So, that is called economic inequality.
Yeah.
Now, and then the big socialist idea is to even it out. To ensure that we have economic equality instead of economic inequality. Now, the reality is that you cannot have economic equality. It is unrealistic. The reason is natural, if you like, God-made, not man-made. So people don't have equality of intelligence, for example. There are some people who are just smarter than some people. They are more brilliant.
Yeah.
Some people are older. So you don't expect a 60-year-old who has worked for his money for the last 40 years
to be on the same level,
to have economic equality with a 20-year-old starter, and so on and so forth. Some people are very hardworking. Some people are very lazy. So there is such natural factors that definitely create a difference. And when you now accumulate or aggregate such factors over generations, because the same way you have individuals who are hardworking and individuals who are lazy, there are family lines. Whether we like it or not, we can trace generations. For the past 3, 4, 5 generations, his grandfather, great, they have been working very hard and making very money in the same line of business. And we now know them as this. This is what they have been doing to the 5th generation, the same line of business. You should not expect that line of business and that family and the children there would now be at the same level as another line where they've made a different kind of choice.
How do you...
So that's to first of all clarify the issue of economic inequality, trying to show that it can be a result of a natural factors whereby nobody stole anybody's money or did corruption or stuff. Life happens that way. We can then say that government should still do something about that, which is fine, but I just established that to show that it can happen without corruption. Now, cronyism, and I would like to talk about what government can do about that later on. Now, cronyism, which is your actual question, is a very, very bad situation, and many people misconstrue it for capitalism. When many people think of capitalism, they simply think of cronyism and they call it capitalism. And so the situation where somebody is the sole supplier of a particular,
of everything else,
that is very wrong. And the thing is that situation is actually the fault of government. In fact, it's like you rightly said, it's corruption. Because when I talk about capitalism, or when Adam Smith, for example, the people who really talked about capitalism, initially talk about capitalism. They are actually talking about a free market system, that you should allow people to have opportunities. Don't restrict them. That was what we're saying all along. Economic freedom. Don't tell somebody that you cannot do this, you cannot do that. Okay, so if there are standards that must be met, that is very good for safety reasons and so on and so forth, regulations. But standards are different from saying that this person is the only one that has the license, and there is no way anybody else can get the license. So when and of course, it's only government that can do that. There is no businessman that can monopolize any industry in this world anywhere by himself, except through government.
So it lies on government.
You see that? Yes. So it's an abuse of power on the side of government to give their friends some kind of favors through legislation to the detriment of other people, and that is how they skew the balance and just spoil the whole show. And that is where they give capitalism a bad name, like what you were trying to say.
What is the story of the random Nigerian who has not been on the good side of Nigeria, who has struggled all his life, and expects, like we said, he might be wrong, but he just wants to survive. He's expecting government, give me. What does he have to do? I mean, for instance, someone who has not been privileged to have an education and has this mentality of government has to provide this for me. I need to be able to go to school, scholarship, whatever I need, government to be able to provide. How do you educate that person to, let them understand that you need to walk your way through, the process before you can survive? I mean, there are many children who were born poor, not their fault. They are victims of the Nigerian situation.
Yeah.
How do you categorize them?
So, So I think examples is the best way to guide people. First of all, one has to be a good example himself, but then you can point out examples. If you look around any neighborhood, like even in the slums, the worst slums you can think of, Ajegunle or wherever, there's always individuals who have struggled on personal merit, through hard work, and lifted himself from there to move to better environments, doing businesses and growing. Some of them have gone to become even what you now call billionaires. There are examples. Like Airpeace, of course, he wasn't in Ajegunle, but the Airpeace chairman, Allen Onyama, who has been lifting, is taking the second trip now.
In fact, he mentioned at the time that the cost was running into millions.
Great. No, it's hundreds of millions. It's not just millions, hundreds of millions. So he's had 2 flights bringing people back from South Africa for free, and they got to Nigeria, they sang national anthem, which is to the glory of Nigeria, which is fine. Abike Dabiri was there and all of that.
And but the thing is, was not first. Of course, they could have helped, but they were not first.
Onyema did it. But what I was trying to say is, I read the story. At a time in his life, I don't know the distance in my head, but he used to trek very long distances in Lagos in order to catch the train. And you know what it means to be catching train in Lagos. If you have gone to Lagos to see what train looks like, how people sit on top of the roof, and train is not what a normal people like you and I'm not sure we want to go and catch Lagos train. If it is Abuja Kaduna, is a different story. But Lagos train, so someone that catches Lagos trains, treks a long distance just to catch Lagos train. I don't think we can call that person a rich man at that particular time.
That's just one example.
But look where he is now. So, and then we can go on and on and on with examples of people. I mean, Shifade Ojo, my employer at Feyisade University, he tells his story about how when he was 14 years old, he didn't even have shoes. Growing up in Ilaramokin, he has the university there, he has the Smoking Hills golf course, he's tiring most of the roads,
businesses,
and so on and so forth. He's employing thousands and thousands of people. So people can move. Yeah, people can move. So that's what I think I want to tell. A stark illiterate, you don't need to go to school to understand this, because you can see examples around you. You can see the carpenter who has moved to a bigger shop. You can see the tailor who has moved to a bigger shop, and so on. So
let's get to wrap this up in due time. But of course, as a think tank, as a founder of a think tank, what is the civil society doing? Are they seeing the urgency of the Nigerian situation? Is there a pattern that Nigerians should follow now? I mean, it looks like the political class are in charge. Do we have to join political parties before we effect like I asked the other time, like we have many intellectuals, we have many professors, many think tanks, but somehow we're not getting things done. What is that little action that we have to do? Because if you are not in politics now, if you are not in power, you can't amend laws, you cannot do anything. What should Nigerians do? I mean, what do we do?
Well, there are people who think that we need to, join politics to fix things. At the time, I began to also think that way, but no,
you stop.
not anymore. So we definitely don't have to join politics. Everybody cannot be doing politics. So just like I have said before, politics is about sharing. It's actually about power.
Interest.
It's about power. It's about sharing resources at best. Politics or governance or government anywhere in the world, it's not about Nigeria, but these are principles. Government is not really productive in terms of creating wealth, in terms of innovation and industry. No, it's the private individuals in their freedom that are able to do that. So what government is able to do effectively is to regulate, to create an enabling environment,
so we shouldn't look
too
closely. We shouldn't look up to government too much, right?
We should be looking at ourselves more. Because even if you want to look at government, we are the government at the end of the day. We are the ones determining. One thing I always say also is that politicians do what is popular. That's the meaning of the word politician in the first place, to do what is popular. So if this is what the people keep, then the politician will come and say yes.
I mean, I saw one example is when the Facebook founder came to Nigeria. He actually donated millions of dollars to a company in Lagos to continuing. That's an example of a private business who has built almost like a country itself. Facebook is 2 billion people and more. He has built a country and he has made a lot of money. It was even the government that had to recognize him because he has done so much. So there's a lot we can do with trade, with businesses and all that.
Yeah.
But then of course people need to understand these things. Please go ahead.
Okay, so but when it now comes to influencing government policy, because I think the crucial part is fine. If we don't then go into politics,
how
can we change the policies? Because there are some policies that just need to be tweaked. So the thing is that look at Not Too Young to Run. The people that made Not Too Young to Run to be passed, at the end of the day, they were not in the National Assembly. They were not politicians. They were people like you and I who were tweeting, who were taking pictures, and hashtag Not Too Young to Run. So the bottom line is that Not Too Young to Run was a very popular idea. People made it popular, so popular that politicians scored points by making it law. And we can do the same with any idea once we understand that this is what we want. What has happened or what has been happening is many times Nigerians cannot articulate very clearly what they really need. They just say, give us light, give us road, give us electricity.
For the most part.
Yes, so we need to go back and sit down and look at, what are the actual policy bottlenecks that are behind the lack of electricity, for example. And to say, okay, amend this law this way and put an hashtag on it or something.
Speaking of the concept of a free Africa, I don't know if you've been following the signing of what is called the African Free Trade Agreement, where countries can now trade, cross-border trading with less restrictions. Is that in line with, the whole free market thing? And where do you see Africa? What are the immediate gains of that policy?
Okay, so the free trade agreement is one of the most beautiful things going on across the continent.
And there is the idea of one passport for the entire Africa.
Yes. One of the things that has made Europe to become very prosperous is the fact that it's very easy. I mean, even before the European Union thing, when there is snow, when snow falls, based on geography, when snow falls, somebody in Russia can hike
all the way
from Russia
across
to Germany
countries,
to France so information flows, markets flow is easy, and this is one of the reasons why they even developed rapidly faster to come ahead of us in the tropics, where we have forests and you cannot even go to the next village because some animals will kill you or something. So but I'm just painting a picture of how freedom of movement is very important. Now the European Union builds on that. And if you are a European citizen or if as an African or a non-European, you get a visa to any European country, that qualifies you to go to anywhere in Europe. You can just ride bicycle. So if you get to school in Germany right now, you can ride bicycle across Europe before coming back.
No visa,
That's what they've been doing for decades. There are trains. You take trains across countries. You ride bicycle. You go by road. It's so free. You don't need to get another visa and apply for anything. So it means there's more possibilities for trade and exchange. And this is how you create wealth, freedom, as we have established over and over. Yeah. Now come back to Africa. What do we have? You can't go here. You can't go there. You can't do this. Restrictions, barricades everywhere. And so we are trading more. The Aba shoemaker is trading. It's easier for him to trade with somebody in America than to trade with somebody in Cameroon. The Aba shoemaker in Nigeria.
And that's because...
You see that? So, but when you open the borders, he can actually push his market to Yaoundé in Cameroon. And it's going to be more profitable for him.
As long as there's easier, communication, you can reach the person.
So anybody that is productive in Nigeria, his market is no longer restricted to Nigeria. His market is, you just put it on a night bus. They take it to Ogadagudu,
in Burkina Faso,
where people are buying it.
I appreciate your time here. So let's inform people about how they can reach your platforms, the course on Udemy, Chale Institute, your social media. Please reel out these things so that people can check out what's happening at Chale Institute.
Okay, so for the African Ideas of Liberty course, you simply go to Udemy, www.udemy.com. Udemy is an online learning platform, just like Facebook is social media for social interactions, but Udemy is focused on academic content, teaching, and not really academic like school academic, but teaching and learning, kind of. So when you get to udemy.com, you just search for African. There's a search frame. Just type African Ideas of Liberty and enter. It will come up. In fact, you can go from Google itself. Just Google African Ideas of Liberty course, but you should put the course behind it. Okay. So if you Google African Ideas of Liberty course, it will take you to the Udemy course. So when you're there, it's free. Just click enroll. You will see, I don't know. Right now, I think we have 689 students and stuff like that. It's always increasing. By the time you're going in there, it could be probably more than 1,000. Yeah. So you it's free. You just take. There are 12 sections, and then you go one after the other. There's video, there's text, and there's a quiz. There's some quiz after every section. You have to answer those quiz questions correctly. When you are done, you get a certificate from Udemy. It's just a 2 hours course. If you sit on it, really.
You have good internet, and you can dedicate yourself to it in 2 hours.
That's right. Yeah. But it's intense. It's power packed. There are additional reading materials that will make it more than 2 hours anyway.
In fact, one
if you're able to go into those ones
that I found was the How Socialism Destroyed Africa, which was written by Professor
George Ayite. That's right, my mentor.
Yeah, very
Professor Ayite actually, edited the entire course. He vetted this. We worked. He really helped. His book is based in America. He's Ghanaian, but he's based in America. Okay. His book, Indigenous African Institutions, was the main resource material I used for that course. And that book was sent to me by Dr. Tom Palmer, also from America.
So you can.
So for the Facebook, right? Chale Institute is the website is www.chale-institute.org. Okay. The Facebook page is Chale Institute. On Twitter at Chale Institute, on Instagram at Chale Institute, even on LinkedIn, Chale Institute also.
Yeah.
And so
one of the things you mentioned is that people who take the course before October have an advantage to go ahead and they can become members of Chale. That's not clear.
So we have a master class that is starting on October 1st.
Okay.
The 3 of them: the master class in policy research, a master class in opinion editorial writing, and a master class in social media advocacy. Okay. So those who to do the master class, you need to complete the African Ideas of Liberty course. The master class is also free. So if you finish it before October 1st, then you can join the master class. Okay. Those master classes will be taught by experts in the respective field from all over the world. Yeah. We have Alexander Hammond from United Kingdom, Cato Institute. We have Chris Hatting from South Africa, Free Market Foundation. We have Khadija Khalid from Tanzania. We have Osman. Dr. Osman is from University of Development
There is a large
Studies in
network of
Ghana.
Africans in this field.
Yeah, definitely. So these are people who will teach this course for free for a month, and after that they would also mentor you for up to 6 months, during which you have so much opportunities. They will push you to explore grant funding, travel grants, to conferences, and I mean
Increase
how
your
you can
knowledge.
fund your innovative ideas. People who say they have innovative ideas and there's no funding, well, let's do this and see what we can get out of it, right?
Great stuff. So you heard it, the Udemy course. I took it and I enjoyed it. It's not so academic. It's mainly how do I say
African
it?
proverbs.
African proverbs, and the music.
Oral
is
tradition.
a good way to spice it up.
folk songs.
The main content is eye-opening. You are going to discover how things were in Africa years
Before colonization, yeah.
and how some of the myths that we have heard about socialism and all that. And I mean, Professor Aite dissolved a lot of things about that. So I'm sure people will enjoy the course if they sign up on Udemy. Thank you so much, Mr. Chale.
Thank you very much.
His name is
That's
Charles,
so cool.
actually.
That's so cool.
Charles Adeyemi, for coming on the Dialogue Podcast.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. So my name
Thank
is
you very much,
Boyega. If you're watching this on YouTube, listening on Anchor or SoundCloud or Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, many other platforms, please let me know by dropping comments on any of the platforms, or send an email to adeoyaboyega@gmail.com. On Twitter, you can find me at boyega_adeoya. I'd like to hear from you. I know people are tuning in from the United States of America on Anchor, from Lithuania, from Senegal, and many other countries. So I'd like to hear more from you. Let me know if you're taking the course on Udemy by Chale Institute. Thank you for watching, and thank you for listening.